She called me a loser after I paid her bills for years, so I cut her off, and her life fell apart. I never thought I'd be working 16-hour shifts to fund my sister's champagne habit, but there I was, hands raw from engine grease, watching her Instagram stories from a five-star resort I'd unknowingly paid for. Family always helps family, they said. What a cruel joke. I stood in the corner of my parents' living room, watching the scene unfold like I was behind glass. My fingers tightened around the water glass. My third refill, because God forbid I have a real drink and say what I actually thought tonight. To Madison! My father Richard raised his champagne flute high. Harvard Business School's newest rising star. The room erupted in cheers while Madison twirled in her new dress, a cream-colored number that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile was radiant, soaking in the admiration from every relative who'd shown up for her celebration. Can you believe it? My mother Deborah was practically floating as she moved from guest to guest. My daughter, the future financial wizard. Who knows, she might be all of your boss someday. Everyone laughed. No one looked at me. I took another sip of water, letting the ice clink against my teeth. 4 years of working double shifts at Mike's auto shop, grease permanently embedded under my fingernails, and somehow I'd become invisible in my own family home. The forgotten son, the placeholder. The party continued around me as plates were cleared and dessert was served. I checked my watch, another hour before I could reasonably escape without seeming rude. That's when I noticed the shift. It's wonderful news, of course, my mother sighed dramatically, but these elite schools, the tuition alone is astronomical, not to mention housing in Boston, living expenses. The room fell silent. I felt it before I saw it, the weight of eyes turning in my direction. I looked up to find both my parents staring at me with expectation written across their faces. Madison was looking too, but her expression was different. Not hopeful, but entitled, as if something had already been decided without my input. A chill ran down my spine. My father approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder with practiced casualness. Son, you're still at the auto shop, right? Heard you've been picking up weekend shifts too? I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. Family always helps family, my mother chimed in, her voice dripping with sugary manipulation. That's what we've always taught you both, isn't it? They didn't say it outright. They didn't have to. The subtext was clear as day. My sister's dream was about to become my financial burden. Of course, I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash. Just some books, some meals, no big deal. But when I looked at Madison, something in her eyes made my skin crawl. There was no gratitude there, not even acknowledgement. She simply sipped her champagne with a thin smile, as though securing my financial support was merely collecting on a debt I didn't know I owed. I shivered involuntarily, suddenly feeling trapped. Something told me this was just the beginning, that I'd stepped into a snare I wouldn't easily escape. But I smiled anyway, playing my part in the family performance while something dark and uneasy settled in my gut. 3 days after the party, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Hey bro, need to buy textbooks. Only about $100. Promise I'll pay you back. I transferred the money immediately, barely giving it a second thought. That's what big brothers do, right? Support their siblings when they need it. A week later, another text. The dining hall food is so expensive. Can I borrow $200? Again, I sent the money. What choice did I have? I couldn't let my sister go hungry while she pursued her dreams. By the second month, the request took a troubling turn. Lucas, the dorm is way too cramped. My friend suggested we get an apartment off campus. Could you help with rent? Just temporarily. Something felt off. Madison's request came with no hesitation, no apparent guilt. Her messages were brief and matter-of-fact, as if my financial support wasn't a favor but an obligation. Soon, I was working double shifts at the auto shop 6 days a week, then picking up side jobs on Sundays. 16-hour days became my new normal. My savings account, once earmarked for a down payment on a house, dwindled rapidly. Dark circles formed permanent residences under my eyes. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone out with friends or even watched a full movie without falling asleep. One night, dead on my feet after back-to-back shifts, I collapsed onto my couch and mindlessly scrolled through my phone. That's when I saw it. Madison's Instagram post from earlier that day. There she was, draped in a designer dress I recognized from a storefront I'd passed, but could never afford to enter. clutching an expensive handbag and raising a colorful cocktail in a restaurant where entrees started at $50. The caption read, "Living my best college life, had blessed." I scrolled further. Photos of Madison and her friends at a beachfront villa for spring break, weekend trips to New York, brunches at places I couldn't pronounce. My heart constricted painfully in my chest. I called her immediately. "Madison, where the hell are you getting money for all this?" My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. "I thought you said you were struggling." Her response came easily, without even a hint of shame. "God, don't be so uptight, Lucas. This is just normal college stuff. Everyone lives like this." The slap of betrayal stung sharper than I could have imagined. While I skipped meals and worked myself to exhaustion, my sister was living like an Instagram influencer, on my dime. After that, Madison dropped all pretense. Her texts transformed from requests to demands. "Need $500 by the weekend. Send it ASAP. You forgot to pay my rent this month. My friends are going to Cancun for spring break. I need $200 by Thursday." The horrifying truth became undeniable. Madison didn't see me as her brother. I wasn't family to her. I was an ATM with legs, an endless resource to be drained without so much as a thank you. The entitlement was breathtaking. Tonight, I stand in my bathroom staring at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. A ghost looks back at me, hollow-eyed, pale, shoulders permanently hunched from exhaustion. I barely recognize myself. Questions circle like vultures. Why am I living like this? Why am I sacrificing everything for someone who sees me as nothing but a wallet? What would happen if I simply stopped? Would Madison suddenly develop responsibility? Or would the demands only intensify, backed by emotional manipulation and family pressure? My phone buzzes on the counter. It's her again. I already know what the message will say. Another demand. Another expectation. Another withdrawal from a well that's running dangerously dry. My finger hovers over the notification. For the first time, I hesitate to open it. I didn't open Madison's message that night, or the 3 that followed. By morning, I had 6 missed calls. When I finally checked my phone, the text progressed from demands to irritation to barely concealed rage. "Need $800 for this month's expenses." "Hello, I'm waiting." "Seriously, Lucas? Check your damn phone." "What the hell is wrong with you? I have bills due out today." Gone were the days of "please" or "I'll pay you back." No more pretending this was temporary. Madison had fully embraced her role as entitled beneficiary of my labor, and I had become nothing more than a financial obligation. I deliberately waited 3 days before responding, a small act of rebellion that felt strangely powerful. I wanted to see what would happen. Day 1, silence. Madison probably assumed I was just busy. Day 2, a barrage of increasingly agitated texts. Day 3, my phone rang nonstop. When I finally answered, Madison's voice crackled with indignation. "Lucas, what the hell are you doing? I've been waiting for that money for days. I can't live like this." Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not a single "how are you?" or "is everything all right?" The realization twisted in my gut like a knife. To my sister, I wasn't a person with needs or feelings. I was a resource that had temporarily malfunctioned. I transferred the money without explanation, and the cycle continued. Until one Thursday evening when my phone lit up with Madison's name. "Lucas!" Her voice bubbled with excitement. "Everyone in my program is doing a semester abroad next fall. What do you think about me going to?" I nearly dropped the phone. "Study abroad? Are you serious? Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "Don't be so negative," she laughed dismissively. "I know you'll figure it out, you always do." The casual confidence in her voice felt like hands around my throat. There wasn't even the slightest acknowledgement of what she was asking. Tens of thousands of dollars on top of everything else. No recognition of the toll it would take on me. In her mind, my purpose was clear, to fund her increasingly lavish lifestyle. "Have you ever considered," I said slowly, measuring each word, "getting a job to pay for some of these things yourself?" The laughter that erupted from the other end of the line was genuine and unrestrained. "You're joking, right? You want me to wait tables like some scholarship kid? Don't be ridiculous." The silence that followed stretched between us, vast and revealing. "That's what you think of me, isn't it?" I finally said, my voice unnaturally calm. That I'm just some loser who exists to bankroll your life. Oh my god, don't be so dramatic, Madison sighed. It's not my fault you decided to be a mechanic instead of going to college. Some of us have actual futures to prepare for. I felt something snap inside me, not loudly, but with the quiet finality of a thread that's been stretched beyond its capacity. Madison, I said, my voice eerily steady, I need to go. Whatever, just make sure you send the rent money by tomorrow and start putting aside something for the study abroad program. I'll need to put down a deposit soon. After we hung up, I sat motionless in my apartment, the truth finally crystallizing with perfect clarity. Madison had never seen me as a human being with dreams and feelings. To her, I was nothing but an ATM, a mindless machine that existed solely to dispense cash on demand. The anger that rose within me wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, calculated, and oddly clarifying, like a fever breaking after a long illness. I didn't yell or throw anything. I simply sat there, planning my next move with a detachment that surprised even me. A confrontation was coming. Not just about money, but about respect, boundaries, and the fundamental question of what family actually means. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. I picked up my phone and began typing a message that would change everything. The text message I sent to Madison was simple. We need to talk, in person, with Mom and Dad. A week later, I found myself sitting at my parents' dining table, the same place where this nightmare had begun nearly 2 years ago. The same polished wood surface, the same family photos lining the walls, the same feeling of being an outsider in my own family. Madison had arrived before me, dressed impeccably as always. My parents fussed over her like returning royalty, my mother fixing her a special plate of appetizers, my father asking about her classes with genuine interest. "How are your finance courses going, sweetie?" Dad asked, beaming with pride. "Professor Williams says I'm one of his most promising students," Madison replied, chin tilted upward. "He's already mentioned internship possibilities for next summer." I sat quietly, watching this familiar scene unfold. Nobody asked about my day, my work, my life. I might as well have been a piece of furniture. My knuckles turned white as I clenched my fists under the table, the anger I'd been suppressing for years simmering just below the surface. The conversation continued to revolve exclusively around Madison, her achievements, her friends, her bright future. 20 minutes passed before anyone even acknowledged my presence. Then, as my mother served the main course, Madison set down her fork with theatrical precision and flashed a calculated smile in my direction. "Oh, I have exciting news. I've decided to join the study abroad program in Paris next semester." I looked up slowly, meeting her eyes. I felt my heart constrict painfully in my chest. "You'll pick up some extra shifts to help out, right?" she continued casually. "The program isn't cheap, but it's such an amazing opportunity." The table fell silent. There it was. Not a request, not even a question. A command, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never been refused. She wasn't asking if I could afford it or if I was willing. In her mind, my compliance was a foregone conclusion. I set my fork down carefully, looking directly at Madison. "Who exactly do you think I am? Your personal ATM?" My sister's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched in annoyance. "Why are you always so dramatic? God, this is such a poor person mentality, always worrying about money." Something inside me shattered. 2 years of resentment, of exhaustion, of being treated like less than human, it all came crashing through the careful walls I'd built. I slammed my palm against the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "Poor person mentality?" My voice was frighteningly calm. "Do you think I'm poor because I lack talent or ambition?" "No, Madison. I have nothing because I've sacrificed everything for you." The room froze. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. My father's face darkened. "Lucas," my mother interjected, her voice sharp with indignation. "What kind of talk is that? She's your sister. It's your responsibility to help her." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "No, Mom. I've helped her for years, and she doesn't even see me as a human being." Madison rolled her eyes dramatically, crossing her arms across her designer blouse. "Oh, please, here comes the victim routine again. You always need to make everything about you." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. In that crystalline moment, everything became clear. Madison would never change. My parents would always enable her, no matter how outrageous her behavior. This toxic dynamic would continue forever unless I ended it. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body tense with resolve. Starting today, I'm not giving you another cent. Madison's smug expression faltered, replaced by genuine panic. You can't do that. I have rent due. I have tuition payments. Figure it out yourself, I replied, reaching for my jacket, like I've had to do my entire life. Lucas, sit down this instant. My father's voice boomed across the table. We are not finished discussing this. I paused at the doorway, turning to face my family one last time. Actually, Dad, we are. I'm done being the family sacrifice. I'm done working myself to death so Madison can post Instagram photos from five-star restaurants. I'm done being invisible until someone needs my wallet. Madison's face contorted with rage and fear. You can't just abandon me. What am I supposed to do? Get a job, I said simply. Welcome to the real world. With that, I walked out, closing the door behind me on their shocked faces. My phone immediately began buzzing with calls and texts, but for the first time in years, I felt no obligation to answer. As I drove away from my parents' house, an unfamiliar sensation spread through my chest. Not guilt, not anxiety, but something that felt suspiciously like freedom. My phone exploded with notifications the morning after I walked out of my parents' house. Madison wasn't taking my decision well. You're joking, right? You can't just abandon me like this. Who do you think you are to do this to me? Fine, I'll tell Mom and Dad everything. Let's see how long you can hold out. Message after message rolled in, each more frantic than the last. I silenced my phone and went to work, feeling strangely lighter than I had in years. For once, Madison's problems weren't mine to solve. That afternoon, my mother called. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but decided this conversation needed to happen eventually. Lucas, what is wrong with you? Her voice trembled with barely contained fury. How could you abandon your sister like this? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Mom, I've supported her for years. It's time she learns to take care of herself. My father's voice suddenly cut in. They'd put me on speaker. You're being incredibly selfish, Lucas. Madison needs you. I couldn't help the cold laugh that escaped me. No, Dad, she doesn't need me. She needs a walking wallet. There's a difference. For perhaps the first time in my life, my parents had no immediate response. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. 3 days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Madison's landlord. Are you aware your sister hasn't paid rent in 2 months? She keeps saying you'll cover it. That's not my problem anymore, I replied simply. Within a week, Madison was evicted from her luxury apartment. With nowhere else to go, she moved back in with our parents, bringing her designer clothes and entitled attitude with her. According to our cousin, who still kept me updated, Madison spent the first few days crying and raging, blaming everyone but herself for her predicament. It's all Lucas's fault, she apparently screamed. How could you let him do this to me? But my parents, now faced with Madison's financial needs firsthand, began to feel the strain. Dad's retirement fund and Mom's part-time teaching salary weren't enough to maintain Madison's lifestyle. For the first time, they experienced what I had endured for years. Madison turned to her wealthy friends next, the same ones she'd been partying with on my dime. They quickly showed their true colors. Sorry, Madison, we can't keep covering for you. If you can't afford to go out anymore, maybe don't join us for a while. One by one, they stopped returning her calls. Her Instagram, once filled with lavish outings and expensive brunches, went silent. The fair-weather friends who had enjoyed Madison's generosity with my money wanted nothing to do with her now that the well had run dry. In a final desperate move, Madison created a GoFundMe page. I discovered it while scrolling through Facebook one evening. I'm facing a sudden financial crisis due to unexpected family circumstances, she wrote. Any help would be deeply appreciated during this difficult time. The audacity was almost impressive. I shook my head, wondering if she truly believed her own lies or if manipulation had simply become second nature. At first, a few acquaintances left sympathetic comments, but then someone who knew the full story chimed in. Wait, isn't this the same Madison who lived extravagantly on her brother's money for years? Another added, I heard she's never worked a day in her life. Within hours, the comment section became a firestorm of criticism. Former friends left mocking remarks. Strangers called her a scammer. Not a single donation appeared. Madison deleted the page within 24 hours, but the damage was done. Her carefully constructed image had crumbled, revealing the entitled core beneath. That night, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize, one of Madison's former roommates. "You should know your sister is in really bad shape. She's talking about dropping out of school." I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions washing over me. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. Madison was finally facing consequences. But another part, the part that still remembered the little sister who once followed me everywhere, felt a pang of sadness. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I poured myself a drink and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about my own future, not as Madison's support system, but as my own person with dreams and aspirations that had been deferred for far too long. 1 month after cutting Madison off, word reached me through mutual acquaintances that my parents' home had become a battleground. Their once pristine facade of family harmony had crumbled under the weight of financial strain. "Your father and mother are fighting constantly," my cousin told me during a rare phone call. "Madison's expenses are draining them dry." Apparently, Madison was making their lives as miserable as she'd once made mine. She complained incessantly about everything. The cramped house that most people would consider spacious, the cheap food that was still better than what I'd been eating while funding her lifestyle. "This is intolerable," she reportedly shouted during one particularly heated dinner. "I can't live like this. Do you know what people are saying about me now?" My phone buzzed one evening with a message I'd been half expecting. "Lucas, I know I was wrong. I just need a little money to get back on my feet just this once, please." I stared at Madison's text, feeling nothing but a calm detachment. Without hesitation, I deleted it and blocked her number. For the first time in years, I felt completely unburdened, free from the constant anxiety of wondering what financial demand would come next. 2 weeks later, the final blow to my former family came in a way none of us could have anticipated. My father called at midnight, his voice ragged with fury and despair. "Did you know about this?" he demanded without preamble. "Know about what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Your sister. She's been opening credit cards in our names. Maxed them all out. We're looking at over $30,000 in debt." I sat in stunned silence as he continued. Madison, desperate to maintain some semblance of her former lifestyle, had committed identity theft against our parents. Designer clothes, expensive electronics, weekend getaways with the few friends who still tolerated her, all charged to secretly obtained credit cards. "I trusted her," my father said, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. "We gave her everything." In that moment, I felt a strange mix of vindication and pity. Madison had finally revealed her true nature to everyone, not just to me. "What are you going to do?" I asked quietly. There was a long pause. "I don't know. Your mother wants to protect her, but this could ruin us." I offered no advice, no help, no comfort. This was their problem to solve. When we hung up, I blocked his number too. As my former family descended into chaos of their own making, I focused on rebuilding my life. Without Madison's expenses draining my accounts, my savings grew rapidly. 6 months after cutting ties, I put a down payment on the small house I'd been dreaming of for years. I was promoted at the auto shop, taking on more managerial responsibilities. I even started dating again, something I'd had neither the time nor energy for while supporting Madison. On a crisp fall evening, as I sat on my new front porch enjoying a well-earned beer, my phone lit up with my mother's number. She hadn't tried to contact me in months. I stared at the screen, watching it vibrate against the wooden railing. For a brief moment, curiosity tempted me. What could she want? Had Madison's situation improved? Had my parents finally seen the truth? Did they want to apologize? I picked up the phone, looked at it thoughtfully, then simply pressed decline. Whatever crisis or reconciliation they were seeking would have to happen without me. I had given enough of my life to their dysfunction. As the call faded from my screen, I smiled and took another sip of my beer. The evening air was sweet, my future was my own, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly, completely free.